I used to believe rock bottom was a place you hit once then slowly climb out of. Turns out rock bottom has a basement. And that's where my story really begins. One morning, I was a college junior with plans, deadlines, a future that felt predictable. By nightfall, I was standing alone in a hospital hallway holding a phone that had just told me both my parents were gone. No warning, no goodbye. Just silence so loud it felt like my ears were ringing. You know that moment when the world keeps moving but something inside you just stops, yeah. That moment stayed with me. Before that day, my life was small but full. My mom was a nurse, the kind patients remembered years later. Calm hands, soft voice, always telling me, people don't remember what you say, they remember how you make them feel. My dad ran a modest logistics business. He wasn't flashy, but he was respected. Sundays meant church, and overcooked lunch evenings meant stories and laughter. We weren't rich, but we were solid. Safe. I thought that was permanent. That was my first illusion. The accident was random. A truck. A split-second decision. By the time I got to the hospital, it was already over. I remember the doctor talking, but the words didn't land. I remember looking at my mom's purse on a desk and thinking how out of place it looked, like it had wandered into the wrong movie. Then the funerals came. 2 caskets. Side by side, people crying, some because they loved us, others because grief is contagious. And standing right next to me crying the loudest was my uncle, my dad's older brother. He held me, told me I wasn't alone, told me he'd step in and handle things. At 19, with my heart cracked open that sounded like a lifeline. I grabbed it without asking what it was tied to. For a few weeks he played the part perfectly. He talked about protecting the family assets, about how school should be my focus. He said all the right words. Then, one afternoon I came home and found strangers loading boxes into trucks. My dad's files, his cars, his equipment. When I asked what was happening, one of the men shrugged and said, "Orders from Mr. Carter." That was my uncle's name. I walked inside and found him sitting behind my dad's desk, relaxed, almost bored. When I confronted him, he didn't yell. He didn't pretend. He leaned back and said, "You're too young. This is too much responsibility. I'm doing you a favor." I argued. I cried. I reminded him I was his brother's daughter. He looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "You have no money, no husband, no leverage. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That's when I realized grief had blinded me. By the time I understood what was happening, it was already done. Accounts emptied. Businesses transferred. Lawyers who suddenly stopped returning calls. Relatives who suddenly decided to mind their own business. And one evening, like it was nothing, I was told to pack my things. The house I grew up in was no longer appropriate for me. So there I was, 19 years old, living in a one-room apartment with a leaking ceiling and a fan that worked only when it felt like it. I rationed food. Some nights dinner was water. Some days I walked to class because bus fare was optional when rent wasn't. People whispered when I passed. She used to have everything. My uncle and his wife didn't whisper. They laughed. Told me I'd fall out of school. Told me no man would want damaged goods. I smiled through it because sometimes pride is the last thing you own. That's when I met him. The guy everyone called crazy. Messy hair, old clothes, mismatched shoes. People crossed the street when they saw him. Kids threw jokes like rocks. The first time he handed me a bag of food, I almost refused. Hunger won. He didn't say much, just nodded and walked away. I cried while eating because it was the first real meal I'd had in days. After that, he showed up from time to time, sometimes with food, sometimes with a few crumpled bills, sometimes just standing nearby like he was making sure I got home okay. People noticed. The jokes got louder. "Look at her now, following a lunatic." My uncle heard. He called me in just to laugh in my face. Told me I should marry the guy since that was clearly my level now. Something snapped. I told him at least the man he called crazy had never stolen from me. His smile disappeared. That felt like a small victory, but it cost me. Life didn't magically improve, but the crazy guy stayed. When tuition was due, an envelope showed up under my door. No return address, just enough. When I needed textbooks, they appeared. When I asked him where the money came from, he'd shrug and say, luck. Eventually, he asked me to marry him. No speech, no ring, just honesty. I said yes, because when the world turned its back, he didn't. That mattered more than appearances. The wedding was tiny. People laughed. My uncle threw a party the same night just to mock it. Marriage was hard. One room, barely enough food, but somehow my school fees were always covered. Then I got pregnant. Fear and joy hit at the same time. The jokes turned cruel. A crazy man's baby. My uncle laughed like he'd finally won. Then suddenly, he wanted peace. Said family should stick together, invited me over, promised help. I wanted to believe him. I went. They locked me in a storage room. No windows. Bare floor. Food slid under the door like charity. Papers brought to sign giving him permanent control. When I refused, the food stopped. They brought in a so-called pastor to scare me with threats dressed as prayers. I held on to my mom's words like oxygen. At night, someone tapped on the barred window. It was my husband. Still dressed like the man everyone mocked. He slipped in food, vitamins, water, and a note that said, "Hold on. 2 days." I didn't know how, but I believed him. 2 days later, engines shook the street. Not police, not chaos. Power, a convoy, black SUVs, a luxury car that didn't belong in our neighborhood. My uncle stepped outside, confused, nervous. A man got out of the lead car, clean cut, tailored suit, calm confidence. It took my brain a second to catch up. It was my husband. The crazy man was gone. He opened the door himself and pulled me into his arms. Told me the truth. He wasn't crazy. Never was. He was wealthy beyond anything I could imagine. He lived disguised, testing the world looking for someone who could love him without money. Someone who saw him when he had nothing. That someone was me. He took me away in that car past the same people who once laughed. He confronted my uncle not with shouting, but with facts lawyers and calm authority. Everything my uncle had taken started coming back. Accounts frozen. Properties challenged. The man who mocked me couldn't even look me in the eye. And as we drove away, I realized something. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. About how quickly people judge how easily they exploit weakness. Today, when I think about it, I don't feel shame. I feel clarity. The world misjudged him. It misjudged me. And sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one holding all the cards. So here's my question for you. Was he right to test the world like that? Was I right to trust? When logic said, I shouldn't. Where do we draw the line between caution and prejudice? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think.